lovely to have you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
You
I'm just going to start off a brief introduction of strong support, and then hopefully we can start. Um, so thanks everyone for joining. Um, for those of you who may be a bit new to strong support, we're just going to give a brief introduction. Hopefully it's useful. So as we start, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, with the Quran. This particular ayah is from Surah At-Tawbah. It's verse 112. And it starts with At-Tabi'un, so the repentant ones, Al-Abidun, the worshippers, Al-Hamidun, the ones who are constantly praising, As-Sa'ihun, the ones who are traveling or the travelers, Waraki'un, the ones who are bowing down, Was-Sajidun, the ones who are prostrating. And then it says, Al-Amirun bil-Ma'ruf wa Nahuna anil Munkar, those who enjoy what is good and those who forbid what is evil or what is deplorable. And then the verse continues and says, وَالْحَافِظُونَ لِحُدُودِ, those who preserve the limits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set. وَبَشِّرِ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ, give glad tidings to these believers. And it's an interesting verse of the Quran because it starts with the people who are repenting, people who are worshippers, people who are praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, people who are traveling in this case, traveling for a good cause. And again, people who are worshipping in different ways, whether it's through ruku or sujood. And the intention is that they're coming together to enjoin what is good, what is right, and they're forbidding what is evil. And that's obviously a core tenet of Islam. And one of the reasons really we started strong support, so we could have a voice in this. So strong support was set up in October 2019. It was set up because there was a vacuum in the Muslim world for Muslims who came and they were struggling with same-sex lust. And it was meant to be a platform when we started for just the people who are struggling. But what we found now is that it's much larger. So it's the families, for example, who are struggling, or it's the community leaders who need support in addressing this. And the intention from the name is to provide peer support and to provide support for these individuals. We are volunteer-based, we're not for profit, and we respect everyone's equal worth, dignity, free will, regardless of how they express their sexuality or how they address it. Because I think for a lot of us in the Muslim world, there wasn't, at least when I started, there wasn't a safe place where you could just discuss things without being judged about what you're dealing with or what you're facing. One of the key things that distinguishes us from perhaps other groups is the notion that we believe not to take on a sexual identity. So we don't we don't say we're straight, or we don't say we're gay. These words are labels and identities which we don't seek to identify as. And there's a lot of reasons why that identity, and we're working in identity politics at the moment, and how a desire or an attraction can become an identity or even a political identity at this point. For most of us in the volunteer base, when we started, our journeys started out with wanting to lessen the unwanted same-sex lust, but what we found was the overall aim was to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's what we call taqwa in terms of God centricity and living a God-centric life. We're client-centered, which means that we're not preaching, we're not telling people what to do. We are letting the client decide how they reach taqwa, how they reach that God centricity, what God centricity means for that individual, and we're supporting them through that. And opposed to, say, the mosque, which will just say, okay, homosexuality is haram or liwat is haram, we are providing practical solutions or practical approaches in our groups, in our discussions, that people can actually take in this journey. So we're here for the journey. We're not just here as an information piece. In terms of our projects, we have a free 30-minute consultation. We've had over 200 people use this service since we've started. We have 3 support circles at present, they're segregated, so one for men and one for women. We also have a number of people who are doing one-to-one sessions with us. And one of the new things which has come up is parents wanting support. So we're looking into creating a parent circle for parents who are looking for support in this as well. So now to move on to the discussion of the topic. And one of the things I'd like to start with is a document that, at least if you're in the UK, you'd be aware of, called this MOU, or the Memorandum of Understanding of Conversion Therapy. Now, this was a document that was written by Stonewall in October 27. There's 2 versions of it. We're looking at version 2 in this, which is the as far as I know, it's the latest version, which is of this document. And you can see it's signed by a number of professional bodies. Now, the reason I put this forward is that the wording of conversion therapy is quite loose. So you will see different documents or different legislations across the world define this differently. But because we're in the UK, I thought, okay, let's look at one definition which the MOU uses. So when we see at point 2 in this document, they always use it as an umbrella term, which basically means you can put anything and everything under this very big definition, which of course makes it problematic when you call it umbrella term. So it says any therapeutic approach or model, or even a viewpoint. So if you hold a viewpoint which is gender critical, for example, then this speaks against that. It basically goes on to say, or even an assumption that any sexual orientation or gender identity is inherently preferable to any other. Now, it's interesting they put orientation and gender in the same clause, and both of them are very different beasts. They are very different types, but they've chosen to put it in the same clause, and we'll see how that causes problems for them later on. And if you read it from a neutral perspective, it seems right. The therapist shouldn't have a bias towards what the client is bringing. And when you read it at first, it's like, okay, fine, yeah, we don't say, like in Islam, we say, la ikraha fi din, there's no compulsion in religion. So we're not compelling anyone to do anything. It's up to the client and what they bring. It follows on to say, which attempts to bring about a change of sexual orientation or gender identity, or seeks to suppress an individual's expression or sexual orientation or gender identity on that basis. And really that is perhaps where it's saying, okay, if you're using a very directive approach, or if you're coercing the individual to follow a line that the therapist wants, or, well, it could be anyone in this case, because it's not just therapy, which is mentioned here, then this is what they're saying, to have a neutral approach. But now, if we look in the next paragraph, that neutrality changes. So what are they saying now? They're saying efforts are sometimes termed, but not limited to, reparative therapy. Now, reparative therapy is an actual type of therapy which Joseph Nicolosi founded. And again, even though there's no such thing as conversion therapy, or it's a term that they're using, reparative therapy is an actual therapy which Joseph Nicolosi finds. So that's okay. They're saying, okay, so people who are wanting to leave unwanted same-sex lust, and Joseph Nicolosi wasn't of the opinion that people, one is preferred over the other. His clients were deciding. But anyhow, we see this, or we say gay cure therapy. Now it's just interesting. Why won't they say straight cure therapy? Why don't they include the other side, which a lot of our population has? When you go to the counselor and they say, but you just need to affirm who you are. You need to affirm to be transgender, or you need to be affirmed to be LGBT. But they don't include that here. And then they use different terms for this. Now, because the second paragraph is quite biased in terms of the type of therapy it calls, or the approach, if you like, it makes it very confusing for people, for faith communities who or people like myself who started, and no one coerced me. My family didn't coerce me. No one came to me and said, you must do this. It was something which I chose on my own. Makes it very difficult for people like that to actually get professional help. Now, earlier this year, we had the Queen's speech by the Women's Inequalities Minister, Liz Truss. And I guess the thing that kind of popped out for me in this was that they used the term coercive. So, and that brings about another conversation. Well, if any therapy is coercive, is wrong, why are we subjecting a particular type of therapy? Any therapy which doesn't have informed consent is, the basis of therapy isn't therapy. You're not contracting properly. But I guess this comes in, and they say anything which protects people from coercive practices, which no one would disagree with, should be banned. As well as this, they add these clauses, which I've highlighted, that they will have a consultation, which we expect to be this month. We don't know in terms of the UK government We'll talk about the Welsh and Scottish governments a bit later, but for the UK government, we expect it to be this month. And they say we still want to protect the medical profession. What does that mean? That basically means in terms of gender identity, and we'll look into that, and defending freedom of speech as well as freedom of religion. Now, some of the news which has come at the moment, I think only yesterday we heard of Bell versus Tavistock. So Kira Bell, who lobbied against Tavistock because she was given puberty blockers at a very early age, in this affirming approach, and wasn't allowed to have given other advice, which suggests that gender dysphoria can settle on its own through watchful waiting, is, we find that the appeal has overturned when it's gone to the other court. But in other terms, we have seen the case for Maya, for Stater, for example. We see that her employee had discriminated against her for gender critical beliefs, but she won that. And then similarly, we see other cases, say James S's, where you're seeing a similar thing, where if people are holding a different type of belief. So remember when we talked about conversion therapy, the definition, it says any individual viewpoint is then considered, which isn't LGB affirming, is then considered conversion therapy, for example. So you're seeing this difficulty when they've put sexual orientation and gender together to these voices which are being silenced, and you're seeing the perhaps unintended consequences of this ban, which the government may not have really thought of or considered when they passed this legislation. Perhaps they did it in a good way of protecting the LGBT from coercive practices which anyone would condemn. So in terms of there's 2 consultations which are happening at the moment, and we sent this out to our mailing list. One of it is actually at the moment in Wales, you have till October 22nd. So I highly encourage, if you haven't so already, please go on the website, fill in the responses for this consultation. They have penned out an LGBTQ action plan, which one of the items in the action plan mentions conversion therapy, and we have given model answers to help guide people in what some of the answers could be in that. The Scottish Parliament also recently held a similar consultation, and you can find the responses there. Again, we provided the answers for that. That ended in August. If you go on the link there, you can see what some of the responses were. So to go to our guest, Mike. Mike doesn't really deserve, everyone knows, but in case you don't know, Mike is the CEO of Core Issues Trust, which is a Christian charity which is there to protect the rights for individuals who want to receive or want to provide care for unwanted same-sex attractions and gender confusions. He is also chairman of professional body IFTCC, which is multidisciplinary in its approach to this issue. Mike himself has worked in different academic posts in Nottingham, Surrey, and Ulster. He founded Core Issues Trust in 2007, and You can see the different projects, for example, the Voices of Silence documentary, as well as the current X Out Loud Global Europe movement, which looks at ex-LGBT voices from the Christian community. He's active in media. So if you Google him, you will see links, you will see interviews that he's done. He is also board member for the Alliance. So the Alliance is the body in USA, which similarly to IFTC sits as a professional body which regulates the counselling and care which is provided by this. No surprise, as you can see, signatories of MOU, people like UKCP and BPA were probably not too happy with this work. And I do encourage you to have a look at, if you haven't already, have a look at Core Issues Trust. There's a wealth of resources and information there, which is out there. And as well as the IFTCC. I know Mike is does a lot of, I think almost weekly I hear of videos and things which are being done in this light. So thank you, Mike, for joining us. And I'm so happy that you could join us on this Saturday afternoon. I'd like to start with something that I think not a lot of people might know in terms of your initial drive in all of this. I remember hearing you went to a counselor who wasn't actually treating SSA, wasn't a specific counselor, but he listened to you and he affirmed your viewpoint and he wasn't dismissive. And that was something that benefited you at that time. And comparing and contrasting that time to perhaps now, where we have, kind of a lot of this, we have this memorandum, we have a lot of this legal terms. But if we go back in maybe 2007 or maybe that time, what were some of the things you were thinking of, or what was it that really made you start the work? Yeah, I'd be interested to hear that.
So, Ali, thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here, and greetings to friends. It's an honor to share with others. For me, I think I was very much journeying through my own issues because for as long as I could remember, I had been conflicted in this area. And there was a kind of duality to it because I was also very committed to my Christian faith. And I experienced a conflict between the inner conflict around sexuality, or the feelings of sexuality, and what I knew to be revealed truth. And then, to cut a very long story short, I married and remain married to Lenore some 43 years later. There came a point in my marriage where things had to change, in the sense that the conflict discouraged me. My self-esteem, my self-worth, my sense of identity as a male really struggled. And so I took steps, as you've said, to get professional help. I tried to reach out into the faith community, but this is 2007. This is
Mhm.
not quite the dark ages, but it was a long time ago. And of course, you didn't speak about this very much, even at that time.
Mhm.
And faith communities or Christian communities certainly were not really in a position to understand this. So I did get help. And I think it was a mixture of gratitude, but also a mission, a sense of mission that I had in my life that said to me, I need to do something here. I felt as though it was personally important for me to do something. And so I founded Core Issues Trust as a very kind of small and underconfident initiative, not knowing where it would go.
Mhm.
And the rest is history, really. We've just gone one step at a time and tried to do what we can do to fight for the rights and the freedoms of individuals to express their desire to move away from feelings and practices that are not what they want. And that's really what we do.
Brilliant. And it has been a journey. I mean, I remember, actually, I remember because I got some of the leaflets, that it was initial leaflets which you had. And I remember getting them and thinking, oh, wow, there is work being done in the UK, as a lot of the stuff is very American. So you're learning from that. And I was so happy that there was a voice in the UK for this. And one of the I've been following your journey, and one of the things that you successfully lobbied in terms of the government, and to say for them to understand this point of view, having a different individual viewpoint isn't discriminatory, just to have an opposing viewpoint. And I remember you said that um, in one of the things that they had said, that the ex-gay as an identity was something that was protected under the Equality Act, because obviously if we're protecting different sexual identities, then people who then take an identity, say, of ex-LGBT, that deserves the protection that someone who would has a as an LGBT would, in a truly liberal society, where you are free in its essence to choose what identity you want to take. And I thought that was quite powerful, because it's all often that we get lost in the identity politics, and we forget they're people. They're they're people who are stuck in this, and they need help. And whether they need help to affirm that identity, or whether they want to explore something else, that exploration shouldn't be. I mean, I don't know about you, but I haven't seen a law in the UK in therapy ever. So therapy is something which is, at least for the UK, still new. It's Counselling hasn't been professionalized legally. It's not a legal term to be a counselor. Yet somehow the first law that comes in the UK to do with counseling and therapy is to do with this, so it does surprise me to the level that it's being taken, and how one side has been silenced. I mean, you have your documentary, which is essentially talking about the silenced voices in this and how the media, and I know you've approached big media organizations and they don't want to air the opposite side of the view, and they want to effectively cancel anyone who believes or thinks differently.
You said a lot there, Ali. I think you're referring to the 2013-14 case in the High Court, the London bus case. We opposed Stonewall's advert, "Some people are gay, get over it." And we put up an advert. They had 1,000 buses, we had 20, which explains the scale of things. But to cut a long story short, Boris Johnson banned those adverts when he was mayor of London. Although he denied it was him, he said it was Transport for London. Of course, freedom of information requests show very directly that he had a hand in that. But the important thing about that case is in the judgment, which is still available if you search for it, in which there is an intervention from the Equalities Office that was at that time being led by Maria Miller. And her lawyers argued that ex-gay in the United Kingdom functions like a protected characteristic. So they were saying it doesn't need to be made a protected characteristic because it does function like one already. And so if a person, in other words, they said it doesn't matter whether you're referring to sexual orientation, past, present, or future, if you hold to this idea of a sexual orientation and it's ex-gay, then it is protected under the Equalities Act of 2010. Now, that case really hasn't filtered through, and there's been I would say, a consistent cover-up to try and forget about that. But the good thing is it's there in the law, and it's something that can be referred back to. So yes, it's a landmark case, I would say, and we did it because we just felt we had to stand up. And I think for me, if we don't speak now, speak our truth now, then frankly, in years to come, I'm not sure we have any right to speak up. And we will have difficulty making ourselves understood. And so it's imperative that we do. Now, in all that you said, there were some other questions, but I'm afraid they've gone out of my mind.
No, that's absolutely great. And you've touched on the case, it's illegal. It's in law that the law recognizes, and we're seeing this a lot at the moment, say with the Maya for Stater case, where it's like Stonewall has this heavy policy which a lot of public bodies have subscribed to, and a lot of them are leaving now because they're realizing that actually it's not human rights based, it's political. It's saying things like you need to make your toilets gender neutral, for example. So it's not just, it's only considering one population, the needs for one population, and it's not considering the needs for the others. And I think in a healthy debate, you need, in any debate of any topic, you need to consider both sides, and both sides need to be given equal proposition. And it's the same thing in strong support. People come up to us and they say, are you anti-LGBT? And we're like, no, we're not anti-LGBT. We would actually fight for and protect their rights so that they are protected in their belief, and they have the freedom to how they want to live their lives. We're not petitioning to ban LGBT communities. We're not petitioning to ban um, what is actually a gay affirming therapy, which you could argue is, if they call us gay conversion therapy, then we can call that straight conversion therapy, right? We're not there to ban that, because what we're here is to give people a choice, you know, and I think that's what is left out in this debate, because all you hear is I always say this, I say there's three lies which you hear that that they've created. Firstly, that you're born with it, and you know that's been debunked, that by the biggest study, genome study project, which is done, which Harvard published. The second thing is they lie that anybody who has approached therapeutic help or in any type of external intervention has been harmed by the process, right? And they will continually say that, and they won't show any evidence. And if they show any evidence in the UK, they'll show it Ozan Foundation. And Ozan Foundation is an LGBT foundation. You can't, you know, it's like saying, I don't know, if we were to say ourselves, oh, Muslims are the best because, you know, this Muslim organization did a survey and say Muslims are the best. Well, it's biased because, you know, the population that you're taking from is inherently biased to what they're saying. So this is the second lie, which to say the third lie is they then they perpetuate is that not only is it harmful, it's ineffective. There isn't first they bring the suicidality, but the third point as well is they say it doesn't exist. So they will completely block out stories of people who experience sexual fluidity. So even the case of, say, Lisa Diamond, for example, in APA, they won't really pay attention to that. They won't pay attention to the concept of sexual fluidity. They might do when it's one way, right? When it's going to LGBT, but if it's coming away from LGBT, they're like, no, this doesn't exist, or you know, there isn't therapeutic intervention which can do this. So there is an inherent bias, which is you know, it doesn't take you know, for you to research reams and reams of this to understand there is an inherent bias in this, and it's the like you've termed the silencing of these voices. And this is where I want to come to the harm that the MOU has done in terms of a professional ban. Now, I know that Core Issues Trust, you know, I read was targeted in social media. I think it was someone tweeted it to Barclays that, oh, you're funding this, and then without any consultation, without anything, they're like, okay, we're closing the accounts. I think your PayPal service was affected, your Facebook was affected, your social media was, and I was thinking, wow, are we living in a free a free speech area? And and it's like, if you listen to Mike's videos, and if there are people from the LGBT community, I encourage you to go listen to the material. Is it really anti-LGBT? Is it really hate speech? Is that what we're doing here? Or is it that we're saying, oh, by the way, we're also a sexual minority. If you want to take us under the LGBTQ banner, we're also a sexual minority. And as a sexual minority, we say that we don't take DLGB or LGBT as an identity. Instead, we working on to reconciling our sexual identity with our faith and what that means for us. So why are we, why are we excluded from the diversity? We're not, we're against, to some level, people say, are you for heteronormativity? I'm like, no, I'm not for heteronormativity, in the sense that you have people who have same-sex attraction, and if you have a culture of heteronormativity, they don't want to hear about us. They'd want to say, oh, no, 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 this doesn't exist. So we're not for that. We're here for people who want to live a life according to their values, their belief and values. And that's what they want to do. It's not because they're being forced by it or there's an external power. And, there's so many individuals I know, who are in this, yet they never get the representation, and they never get the voice. And if you do speak about it, your Instagram or your Facebook channel or whatever is taken down. I was telling this other person, and I was saying, have you heard of Amazon banning books? Have you even heard that? And yet we see that books which are helpful for this cause are banned. And if you read them, I encourage you to read them, these banned books, and really see if they are really spewing toxic hatred, or if they're using crazy pseudoscientific methods which have absolutely no base in psychology. I encourage you to read them with an open mind and say, okay, like people have the Atkins diet, right? People take different diets and it doesn't work out for them. They're like, okay, let's try something else. No one's going to ban the Atkins book diet because there was a phase where everybody was doing Atkins diet and say, no, this must be banned because it didn't work for me. So let's go and ban this. And the silencing is amazing. I mean, it still continues to amaze me. And I think in the UK, I would say, because you represent, or you're in the public eye, I've seen interviews with yourself, and I'm cringing. I'm really cringing, and I'm thinking they're just being obnoxious at the end, and they're not, giving yourself a voice. And I wonder how resilient. I always admire your resilience and how resilient you are to these people who don't want to listen. They just want to push their view, push their agenda, and they don't want an open and honest conversation about this, because at the end of the day, that's what we're asking. We're asking to have a conversation, an open and honest conversation, where both parties reach to an agreement. Just banning it professionally or through the law isn't going to stop people living the lives they want to live. It's not, you can't just ban a choice of people heading a certain way. You can't ban voices who come in and said, this therapy or the material or the support which I received helped me. You can't just ignore and erase these voices. So yeah, sorry, I've blubbered on. I just want to see what your thoughts are, being in the center of all of it.
Well, I think it's very important what you say about the centrality of the Memorandum of Understanding. And I remember in 2013, writing to the then Minister of State and saying, we would like to participate in this round table. They were calling for a round table. And he wrote back to say, no, we couldn't, because we were too far away from the unanimity that all of the organizations had on this. And freedom of information requests, again, have revealed that groups like Pink News and the UKCP were directly instrumental in stopping Core Issues Trust from participating in those meetings. Now, I think what you're saying is important because you're highlighting this whole area of viewpoint discrimination. And I think that is what we are suffering from. And the problem is these monocultures of LGBT ideology have such a stronghold on the mental health profession that where we are now is that they control who does the research, who publishes the research, and whether or not something can be published is going to be determined by an ideological point of view. If you want to study to become a counselor or a psychotherapist, you're right, these are not protected terms in Britain. And you're right to point out that it's extremely odd that in this one area now, the government chooses to get mixed up in, the professions. So what has happened now is that there is such a stranglehold on this that if you apply to become a psychotherapist, you're going to have to be pretty under the radar in terms of your viewpoint if you hold a perspective of faith, or you choose to say that this is not something that is consistent with your point of view. You're going to be hammered, and that's obviously what we were seeing. That's what I fell short of, and they came after me, took away my right to complete my studies, etc. So, that is what we are facing. And that's why it is absolutely essential to stand up and state the opposite. And, as far as all those interviews are concerned, Ali, what I would say is who is interviewing you is completely irrelevant. What is relevant is the people who are listening. And that's where the focus has to be. So when you're in that situation, you respond to the questions, but you are trying to communicate to a broader audience. And I would say through all of those interviews, which are, probably quite painful to watch, there have always been people who have been so angered by what they have heard that they will make contact and perhaps for the first time talk about the issues that have held them back in their lives. Because this is a vital issue to people. So yes, I think you've hit the nail on the head. This viewpoint discrimination is what is challenging us in our country. And what we need is ideological diversity, because in the end, if we have ideological diversity, then all of us surely have to come and listen to the to scientific methodology. We have to submit to what the science says in terms of evidence. And that is what has been fundamentally destroyed, I would say, in Britain. We have moved from having a critical perspective and being able to critique things to one where we are required to be compliant. And the Memorandum of Understanding has the signatures of what? I don't know, is it 15 or 20? I can never work it out. Individual organizations who forbid their members to offer change exploring therapies. And so that's what we're faced with. And that's why I think we have to be resistant. And we are a resistance movement. We will not tolerate that. We can do it with dignity, with grace. We can be polite. But in the end, this is damaging to women, to children, and to men. and we need to stand up for those groups.
Absolutely. We had, in terms of children, we had our last webinar with Them Before Us, which basically talks about children rights for people who are in LGBT parents, for example. You know, they don't have rights in terms of, okay, in that relationship, does a child need a mother and a father, for example? You know, other segments of society which are kind of forgotten in this, you know, and the impact it kind of has on, like you say, on different groups, on faith groups, on children,
Yes.
on women, for example, in a sense that if we had the, you know, the famous presenter who kind of leaves his wife and then he's celebrated and no one really thinks about, well, what about his wife and children? What, you know, are we so much into what I would call individualism, individual culture, that we're very individualistic in our thinking and we're not thinking about things as a whole, as a collective. But one of the things I've seen that you've taken active steps in addressing this is you said, okay, you know, UKCP, Royal College of Psychiatry, all of these organizations aren't actually allowing for a healthy debate. They're showing viewpoint discrimination. And so you've set up IFTCC, which is a body, essentially a professional body, which then does that. It regulates the, you know, this work so that it is done in a safe, evidence-based way. As you said, scientific. Where's the science in this? If you're going to reject something, the MOU doesn't refer to any scientific document whatsoever. You know, and how can you professionally ban anything without, you know, without actually, and if you want to be true, then do, you know, like we have a census or do a census, do it, not just take a sample from LGBT, do a census and then see where these terms, I mean, there's so many terms in the media, like 700,000 they say in US, and you try to figure where that number is coming from. No one knows where that number is coming from. There's so much misinformation which is out there, and it's not sourced. It doesn't, or if you look into the source is questionable to where they've derived their conclusions from.
So in 2013, I can't remember when we had the so-called debate on equal marriage. But what we found when we looked at the Royal College of Psychiatrists' submission to both the government and to the Church of England, the state church, we found that out, I think it's 19 references, we found 11 of them had been miscited, misquoted.
Amazing.
Now, you know, I guess a critic could say, well, of course you're going to say that. And I get where they're coming from, but not very long after we discovered that, we wrote to what was then the Pilling Commission, which was an internal commission led by the bishops of the Church of England. And we put this to them, that actually the Royal College of Psychiatrists, led by Professor Michael King, who just recently died, had misled the church and the state because they miscited what the intention of the authors were of the primary research that they quoted. And the Pilling Commission, and you can find it, you can read the Pilling Commission and you can search for Core Issues Trust. The Pilling Commission came back and said, we were correct. So that was an independent body that recognized that. But what was done? Nothing. You know, nothing was done in terms of pointing out respectfully to this professional body that they had misled us all.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at the current government's LGBT strategy from 2017, I'm not sure if you have picked this up, but if you try to complete that, as I know I did, you could only get into about the first 2 screens if you're doing it online, because it was closed to anybody other than LGBT identified persons, which means that anybody who was formerly LGBT, who has experienced, successful interventions that have helped them, were automatically excluded. So this is extolled as the most extensive survey in this area. But here it completely marginalized anybody who has received effective help and has moved away from LGBT. And of course, this is an international pattern. This research is often grounded by those or supported by people who become the database who are LGBT. So they will put adverts, have you been hurt by conversion therapy? And where do they put them? They put them in places that are accessible to LGBT persons. Nobody else has a say. So there is great misinformation. And think of it this way, that we keep hearing about the extremes. The government spoke about conversion therapy, including such things as corrective rape. Well, where in Britain is this happening? Absolutely. Freedom of information request, 0 convictions ever. It relates to something that was happening in South Africa in a very, remote section. Electroshock therapy, all of these things are being cited and have absolutely nothing to do with the present reality. Who is doing conversion therapy? Who calls it conversion therapy? So to bring it back to what you're saying about harm, well, a former iteration of the Memorandum of Understanding, the 2014 document before the 2017, did cite the APA, the American Psychological Association, which said there is no research one way or the other that proves, that this is harmful or effective. There is no valid research that has gone through ethical committees, etc., which is saying categorically that this is harmful. And that's why historically in the UK, the government has always spoken about potential harm. Now, as you say, let's look at the harm. Let's find the harm. That's why the IFTCC has been set up. We work according to an ethical framework. We work according to guidance and a practice approach that revolves around specific guidance. And okay, we take on board that there can be harm. The thing is, the media are the people who have uncovered certain extreme practices. So if you look at the work of Paul Brandt, who is now leading ITV News, if you look at the Ozanne Foundation, often they cite the work of undercover journalists who approach people and then, in the guise of wanting help, they try and entrap people, and then this information is used. But the point I'm trying to make is this is contrived. This is entrapment. This is not reflective of general practice. So that's why the IFTCC exists, so that we can be publicly accountable. The other thing that maybe is not well known, in 2013, when this Memorandum of Understanding was beginning to formulate, we contacted the Professional Standards Authority and said, look, we want to be publicly accountable. We want to be able to show ourselves to be aligned to standards in professional mental health. So we would like to have a register of practitioners who would put their heads above the parapet and say, we're doing this change allowing work, but we are here to be accountable. And that's what the professional standards body, which is controlled by Parliament, does. So their response was, no, we couldn't participate because we're conversion therapists, basically because the Royal College of Psychiatrists said we were. So there are layers and layers in all of this that I'm afraid have to be exposed and unpacked. Because it's not just us. It's certainly not just the Christian community. It's every community in Britain. And there's a totalitarianism at the bottom of all of this that I think we should rightly be very aware of and threatened by, because it will take away fundamental human rights.
Yeah, I think very, very beautifully put. And I also think one of the things which I reflected on was, as you said, putting your head above the parapet requires a lot of strength for an individual to do. And if you see a lot of the people who are working in this sector, it's people who struggled with SSA themselves, so even like yourself, when I started Strong Support, it wasn't because I was, I had an interest in it. I was forced to do it in a sense that there wasn't anything being done about it. And you don't see this. So for example, if I was suffering from anything else, and then you find the practitioners are people who've already gone through it. So if you go to the doctor is there because he's already gone through it. You'd be like, hang on, this isn't right. This, why is it? And I think that is a real good indication of the discrimination, that the only people who choose to put their head over the parapet are people who have extremely suffered and know the pain which these bans and this professional ban or this legal ban or this culture of totalitarianism is putting on us. It's I was speaking to a friend and I was saying one thing is struggling with the SSA and having that, and then you have another struggle, which is getting help, getting people to understand our viewpoint. I went to the first time I sought counselling, I went to a therapist, and I said to her that I have issues around my masculinity, and I needed, and she was an expert in EMDR, and I remember reading Nicolosi at the time, and I was saying, great, so maybe she can help me with that. She refused to help me in the EMDR, and what she kept saying in the our sessions, we had 6 sessions because that's what they normally, CBT practice, they book 6 sessions. And she said that I had a mantra in my head that I was not masculine or these things. So she actually challenged the issue I was bringing to the table. And then I'm
Your,
going,
your
yeah,
integrity, in other words.
exactly. And I was like, no, you're not understanding me. And the frustration of her not acknowledging my pain harmed me. I left each session, I had 2 sessions with that therapist. I cried at the end of each session because I was feeling she's not understanding what I'm saying. I finally mustered enough because it takes people who have gone to therapy, it takes a huge deal to start opening up and sharing. And I finally reached that point. Now I'm finally sharing with someone, and they're saying, on the 3rd session, you know what she said to me? She said, have you recommended pink therapy? And I was like, have you heard what I've been trying to say? And the funny thing was, when I went to her, I didn't go to her for SSA. I went to her for issues around men and masculinity, but she picked up on it and she said, she asked me directly what, because CBT is very directive, so it will ask you. And she terminated the sessions herself. Halfway through the 3rd session, she said, I can't carry on. That was traumatic for me, and I had to and I say, why isn't this type of story being put on the media when you're going to a gay affirmative therapist, right? And they challenge you, they belittle you, they say you have a mantra in your head for believing this. Don't you think I'm going to be harmed by this type of approach? And yet, if she was being reviewed, she's doing the right thing, because what do all these bodies say? Oh, you have LGBT, refer them to pink therapy. You go to pink therapy, is there one counselor in that organization who has a faith-based view? No, there is no one in that. And if someone wants to join it, they'll say, oh no, this is, this is a conversion therapist. So, and I realized this, and then I realized the need to having our own research, having our own figures. So, they say this, okay, we're harming people. Let's do a survey on the people who've accessed support, say for strong support. We did that and we showed, look, this is what people are saying. And I think what you're doing, and the brave people who are coming forward to you X Out Loud, for example, they're very, very brave people coming forward and sharing something so intimate, what the public is going against, and going forward. And I think our responsibility as, in the organizations is to say, yes, you only see me, but you don't see the hundreds of people who are anonymous because they're caught in this. And and it's not about what I think, it's about showing these voices which are trapped and they don't get the light of day in the media, and showing that narrative, showing, maybe hearing stories like, I know of someone who said, Ali, I went through a year of with a therapist, and it harmed me because she constantly challenged my view on sexuality, right? um, and I think, and that's one of the reasons, like in my work, I think it's so important to speak for the truth. We're not here to destroy someone else's truth or to discriminate at someone else's truth, but we're here to speak the truth of these individuals. For example, in the Muslim community, there is a huge stigma on this. And so people don't come forward to this. They won't come publicly and they'll say, there's a huge, huge stigma. And we're slowly trying to get people in an attempt that they anonymously write their story or have that. And there are hundreds, and strong support, we're very, very small. We've not really marketed. And yet we've received hundreds of people who've come all over the world, not just UK, all over the world, who have come to this? And it does really shock me. But I think what's beautiful is that I was speaking to someone and they were saying, Ali, yep, you can't advertise to Facebook, you can't use social media because they've banned that. But there's another means that you can get to people, and that's through God. God sends these people. I tell you, we don't know where. I tell to people, how did you find us? They say, oh, this happened, and we're not really advertising ourselves. People are somehow coming to us because they're essentially they're trying to find a way where they can live with their beliefs and values. They want to live a certain way, and they're looking for support in that. It's not that we're lobbying to them. And do you want to share? I remember you saying like half of your people that come to you aren't even from your faith background, they're from other faith backgrounds.
Yes, it goes up and down, but it's normally it's about 50% would be Christian, and then the rest would be no faith or other faith groups. What you say, I think, is really important about testimony and about the power of narrative and story. I can give you many examples of when I've been asked to do interviews and I've said, well, I'd like you to interview somebody from X Out Loud. And they're just refused. And that makes me suspect that they are wanting to create the impression that it's just the older generation and just a few extreme voices that hold this point of view. I think that's the intention. That's why X Out Loud now has completed this book with 44 stories from 22 different nations. And we've made arrangements now that every politician in the House of Lords and in the House of Commons and in all of the devolved governments around the UK will receive a copy. And the intention is to say, look, we're here. We're not going to go away. And this is our point of view. We want to be recognized and we want to be heard. And I think the book is just ordinary stories. And I'm sure in your own communities, exactly what you have shared now about the harm that you experienced, well, that would be a gift to everybody if you would, share that, make that available, tell the government, participate in all the consultations, as I'm sure you are. That is exactly the message that needs to be heard. And we may have lots of differences, but we can be united in this one thing, that this is a threat to our fundamental human rights and ability to live as constructive citizens in this country.
No, I completely agree that it's a human's right issue that we're dealing with. And as faith communities, non-faith communities, we need to, people in psychotherapy or people with, who uphold freedom, freedom of choice, really, to uphold and say, well, let's be fair. Let's have a fair and honest. That's all we're asking for. We are asking for a fair and honest discussion on this. So as you've mentioned, what are some of the things that we, the people in this audience or people who be watching this can do? So there's the consultations, as you've mentioned, to go and reply to them. What are some of the other things that you think we can do on this?
I think you can write to your MP, and I think you can share your story as far as you can in a wise way. And when they write back and say, as they always do, that the government or our party is against conversion therapy, the letters are almost identical, as though there's a template that they pass around. Well, I think we have to rise to the challenge and write back and expose just how meaningless that jargon is, and not give up, be tenacious. And I think your own community has the potential of communicating in a way that others haven't.
Mhm.
And I would use that to its full advantage, and take, we're a community generally that have damaged self-esteem, low self-esteem, a poor sense of worth.
Mm.
Well, now is the time for us all to put our shoulders back, our head up, and to march in a way that says to the world, this is important to us and to many who are disempowered, who do not have a voice, who cannot speak, and are locked in rooms where they are lonely and brokenhearted, and where they are being damaged by therapists who are ideological in their approach. And this comes from the directive of the Memorandum of Understanding. This approach to mental health has to be pulled down. It's the underpinning document that is bringing together all of these mental health bodies, and it is simply under an LGBT identity. It has to be renegotiated. It has to be re-examined. And that's the message, that I think we need to get to the government, to the Minister of Equalities, the Minister of Women, people like Kemi Badnos, all of these people. Actually, I think they know it. And I think that's why the thing is still delayed. I know there's a lot happening in the government, and, there's been a cabinet reshuffle, and there are major things with COVID and everything. So September is slipping away. Maybe this request to consult on conversion therapy will come kind of the last day of the month, but it looks to me, I might be wrong, but it looks to me like it might be in October or some subsequent time. We know that they're aiming to put the legislation through Parliament in the spring of 2022. So there's lots of time, Ali, between now and then for us to campaign, to speak up, and to write. And it sounds like a book you're talking about. You may well have a gem there that can speak great truth, and I would not underestimate the importance of that.
No, absolutely. And what you've shared with the power of stories and the power of narrative, and how valuable it is now for people who are listening, or people like myself, to rise up and not be afraid, and that this is the time now to speak truth, speak what has happened, or all we're asking for people to do. And we started this with strong support. We published the first few stories, 4 stories in our page, and we're asking people for more. And people always come to me and they say, Ali, I'm not a success story. It's not. And so we're not looking at success stories. We're looking at the truth. We have 4 questions. We say, describe your current state. What helped you? What didn't help you? And then we ask, what would you recommend to other people? So it's a very simple, it only can take maybe a minute or so for people to go in. You can do it anonymously. You can put your name into it. You can, if you want to go even further, we can do a webinar. We can do it in this format. But you're absolutely right. The time is now to speak, and to come forward with these voices, and not be afraid to just share the truth. You know, we're not here to win, and we're not campaigning ideologically. All we're saying is come here, share your experience, share your truth, so we get a true representative view, a scientific view on this population, you know, and that we're not left out essentially in this argument. So,
by the way, there is some great research that is just about to come out, and there is some research that has been re-examined by Professor Paul Sullins, Professor or Dr. Christopher Rosick. But this latest research by Professor Caroline Peller, it will be reviewed at the IFTCC conference in October. This, I think, is very encouraging in terms of how counselling and therapeutic support really does impact on people who have suicidal feelings. And it's been shown over and over again that far from encouraging suicidality, this therapy actually improves the chances of people in. And I think, you know, what you're saying about we're not expecting people to share perfection or categorical change, which is very rare anyway. I think what we're asking for is people to share, you know, what their goal is, what they want to achieve, which surely is sacrosanct. Why is it that in psychotherapy in this country, we really do value autonomy, and we want to respect people's freedom, except in this one area? And of course, the reason is because we are promoting the ideology that sexuality is fixed, unchangeable, and that it is equivalent to race. And you said it correctly. It's been debunked over and over again. Even the 2019 study by Ghana, there's a tiny genetic contribution, but the rest is about the environment and about what happens to us. So if that's the case, there is absolutely no reason to be denying anybody the right to access help, whether it's, you know, pastoral help or clinical professional help. It needs to be a fundamental right.
Absolutely, no. And before we move on to Q&A section, just to tell the attendees who are there, you can write anonymously. So this is live. So you can use the Q&A option at the bottom. You can also upvote. If you want to speak, you can raise your hand. Just be aware that your name would be then shown on the stream, or if you prefer to stay anonymous, then you can do that through the Q&A section. But before we go on to Q&A, are there any points you would like to raise, Mike, before we go on to the next section to maybe close off some of the discussion?
I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but people will be welcome to come to the IFTCC conference. It's not advertised, but if they're interested, I can give the details to you,
Absolutely.
Ali, and you can see that we have had people who come from the Muslim community in the past. We are focused very much on the science and also the practice. The majority are Christians, but, you know, what we're trying to do is to show the world that we are serious about monitoring ourselves and making sure that we take our work seriously.
Absolutely. No, we will send us details, and we will definitely send it, and any work, like I say, which we can do collectively is always welcome. So we've got, so you can start writing your questions hopefully now. We've got our first question. Wow, it's a very long question, but I'll read it. Thank you for sharing the knowledge about this issue. In my humble opinion, the ideology of conversion therapy nowadays is strongly from religious belief, which is of course anti-LGBT, because religion never allowed LGBT practice, even condemn it forever. Sorry if I'm wrong. As a religious man, I admit it and I accept it. I definitely agree with conversion therapy movement. It's interesting that we should struggle our right to practice our belief or what we want to be. If conversion therapy, of course, like any therapy, has some success to convert and some to not. For some who are not to convert from this therapy, is there any shame, feeling, depression, self-blaming because they cannot become what their belief taught them? Is this thing potentially harmful for those who cannot convert at the end of therapy, because they will continuously conflict in their life because they cannot reach their standard, their belief standard? So I guess what's being asked there is, if you're unsuccessful in using therapy.
Well, I think that it's an important question, but here's the thing. What are we doing in counseling and psychotherapy? Are we promoting categorical change, like the flick of a switch, gay to straight kind of thing? That certainly isn't what we are doing. What we are doing is we are exploring sexual fluidity. The fact that people are feeling feelings that they don't like. We have to remember that the largest of the non-heterosexual groups are those with mixed attractions. So the proportion of those who only struggle with same-sex attraction is smaller than those who have mixed attractions and can go in either direction. So counseling and psychotherapy, in my view, is about exploring this fluidity that goes all over the place. And for the fact that some people want to settle on one and not the other. Now, gay folk are happy enough to receive gay affirming therapy, and they're affirmed in that, and off they go in that direction. But some people who have mixed attractions don't want to affirm homosexuality. They want to affirm heterosexuality, and they want to experience that. So I think the focus of the therapy is to discover, first of all, where the direction that the client wants to go in. Once that's been established, then it's about listening to them in terms of their history, what's taken place in their lives, and to see if there is anything that can be done to help them to recognize where they are, and to see what can be done to strengthen that side of their fluidity that they feel comfortable with. And that's the work. So, you know, if we set people up in an unrealistic way, that they're going to get married and have 3 children within 2 years after 25 sessions, well, obviously, that's a recipe for disaster. And I think the question is a good one from that point of view, but I would really question this assumption that this term conversion therapy is a useful one. It is an imposed thing. It's something that we don't use. It actually damages the religious idea of conversion, in my view, and it also damages the idea of ethical psychotherapy and counseling. It's neither one, it's a mixture of terms, and dangerous from that point of view.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. The next question. Sir, you were telling about a book which has stories of people who face such issues. How do people from other countries other than UK, such as Southeast Asian countries like India, avail this?
Well, we've said if you go to the landing page for the book on X Out Loud, just go xoutloud.com and then look for the book. And you will see that the postage is anywhere in the world for the price that's offered there. Now, you know, it's not cheap, but it's the cheapest that we can make. So what we will do is, wherever you are in India or wherever, we will get it to you if you order a book. That's the undertaking that we've given.
Thank you. And it brings to light how global this issue is, isn't it? That we have people from India. So you can continue to write your questions. One of the questions which I had is where I think the IFTCC is a beautiful concept. And, you know, I pray that you have the multidisciplinary approach, that you have diversity in the organization, which comes in. So people from, because we're seeing a growing amount of resistance in the gender identity, especially where that field coming forward and then saying, oh, actually, we're opposing the conversion therapy bill because it is giving children puberty blockers, for example, at a very earlier age, because the T in the LGBT movement says, oh, they're transgender, and books and books of medical books are put aside of gender dysphoria, which have years of research from different countries. And it's, you know, I was reading this article which saying somewhere between 60 to 94% of children get grow out of their gender dysphoria, but you know, so you're seeing this new kind of emerging things. And I know IFTCC doesn't only look at sexual identity, it also looks at the as you call the detransitioning movement. What do you think are some of the say a 5-year plan or a goal point for the IFTCC in, you know, kind of, what are some of your aspirations, I guess, with that work?
Well, we still want a professional register of practitioners. We want to be able to say, these are the people that we feel are credible and who have been suitably trained, and they hold qualifications in this area, but they don't agree with the Memorandum of Understanding. So I guess ultimately, you know, all of these organizations, the Royal College of Psychiatrists, the UKCP, the British Council of Psychotherapy, they all started as clubs or guilds. And then over the years, they became more specialized, more sophisticated. They received funding. They grew in esteem. I think what we hope to be ultimately is a professional body that challenges this notion and that is part of an international movement that does hold to an ethical standard and to a set of guidelines that will impact on the way we practice and the way we do our work. And then if people come and they want a therapist or a counselor, then we know that the people we are linking them to are safe, that they are, they're working according to professional standards. Now, that may be sometime in the future, but if we don't start now, we haven't got a hope in 10 years' time if we're still here on this planet. So I think it's time to lay the foundation and to get our own house in order, and to do what we can do to professionalize. That's basically what we're trying to do. And and also, sorry, Ali, I think as part of what you are doing, to create safe spaces and to create contexts where there can be discussion and there can be openness in terms of issues around all of this. That's what we're trying to do. And we recognize that we can't do it on our own. And that's why we're working internationally. And also, we don't want to work on our own because the Norwegians and the Slovaks and the Hungarians, they have ideas and they have a professionalism. Asia truly is a sleeping giant. They have escaped much of the LGBT ideology. And so their professionals are not in the same position as those in the UK who have been completely intimidated by the MOU. So we have to learn from them and use their expertise as well.
No, I think I admire the international, and multidisciplinary and diversity, that already the IFTCC is taking in, and we will definitely encourage members to attend the conference and to take part in it. Definitely. We have a question from Trinidad in the Caribbean. I would like to get a therapy center set up in Trinidad. We do not have any laws, you've just mentioned, that prohibit this type of therapy. Can someone contact me? What would you recommend for someone in Trinidad? How would they get help?
Well, I think there are many counselors who are doing one-to-one work online. That's certainly a way to access that. I mean, to set something up in the Caribbean, I do know that there are people working in this area in the Caribbean. Certainly lawyers who are concerned to protect rights and freedoms. Once again, what I would do is I would look for any individual who shows, even the slightest interest in protecting human rights, and I would raise it with them. And I would begin to network, go to conferences, follow them online, try and, contact them and talk about your goals. That's a worthy goal, but it's not going to happen overnight. You have to find the people who are qualified and motivated. Now, if that's not your expertise, you can still play a part. You can still motivate, you can raise the issue. You can say, look, if we don't do this now, in 10 years' time, we're going to be flooded with this LGBT ideology and the impact of it. And so if you have that on your heart, I would say that that's a good thing to go with.
Thank you. Okay, and he's given us contact. Yes, brother, if you can also contact us if you need any further support in that, we can contact Mike on behalf to see if we can link, if there's people in the Caribbean which can help. So thank you for that. To just looking at the time, we've slightly gone a little bit over. Is in terms of the landscape now, just to kind of summarize some of the conversations, you know, I honestly pray, you know, for you know, the community, your community, Mike, the Christian community, which has over in the past decade or even longer really campaigned for the rights for faith communities. And as you say, it's a human right. It's a human right to choose how we would like to seek support and how we would like to live our lives. You know, at least from us, it's strong support and from the faith community to honor the work which has been done. And our community is slowly, you know, kind of giving good signs of people addressing this issue, and even, you know, kind of coming up and speaking about it. We are, you know, as a faith, as our faith teaches us, we enjoin the good. We started with the verse of the Quran. We enjoin the good. We forbid the evil, and it's a duty upon us to speak for what is right and speak for people's rights. And I do encourage people who are watching this, and if they do feel motivated in this cause, and if they really feel that they do want to do something, even in their respective communities, to please to reach out for us, and we can support you in any way that we can. And it isn't you know, as Mike mentioned, we don't want people who are completely alone and they're struggling alone in this, and just to recognize that there is support available for this, and you know, hopefully to join, if you join our mailing list, for example, then we can keep up to date with the things that Mike's mentioned, and to go forward from it. Mike, I'll leave you to final words if you would like, and just wanted to say, you know, thank you so much for your time, for joining us today, and you know, on behalf of the team, which you don't really see from Strong Support, we really appreciate the work you're doing. Core Issues Trust, X Out Loud, IFTCC, and you know, we pray for your continued success.
Thank you so much, Ali. It's been great to connect with you, and it's wonderful to see what is happening through Strong Support. I suppose my heart is heavy because I think our faith community is divided. And unfortunately, a big part of the faith community is in support of what is happening. And I think this is one of the biggest issues that we face. But in the end, as small as we are, we can only stand up and speak our truth, and to do it with all our heart and to live as best we can by grace. So we have a great fight in front of us, but I believe it's worthy and something that we can be proud of, that we're doing the right thing, I believe.
Absolutely. No, said very beautifully. And I would like to thank you again so much more. And we will contact you if you have further questions, God willing. And I'd like to thank all the attendees and Mike, and thank you. God bless.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.